The sharp pain of tendinopathy has finally subsided, but when you return to training, the quadriceps feels weak and the injury flares up again. Most athletes assume tendinopathy is strictly a mechanical problem, where damaged tissue must be loaded to rebuild structural capacity. Clinical data shows that chronic tendinopathy produces measurable pathological changes inside the central nervous system. The biological driver of this weakness is cortical inhibition. A neural signal originates in the brain, but loses intensity as it travels toward the quadriceps. Your brain detects the vulnerable tendon and downregulates electrical drive to the surrounding muscle to protect the joint. The quadriceps muscle itself remains structurally capable of producing force, but the motor cortex is intentionally limiting the intensity of the electrical signal it sends to that muscle. If you focus exclusively on tissue healing, this inhibition can persist, explaining why strength deficits and high recurrence rates often remain even after the tendon has recovered. Recovering from chronic tendinopathy requires both structural repair of the tendon and a systematic reorganization of the motor cortex. The most natural instinct to solve persistent muscle weakness is to simply apply more and more weight to the rehabilitation exercise. But when you perform familiar, self-paced lifts, the brain relies on a motor autopilot, executing movements without requiring active, conscious attention. Heavy, self-paced loading applies physical strain to the tendon, but because it runs on this autopilot, it fails to engage the inhibited motor cortex. To break that inhibition, you must use externally paced, metronome-synced resistance training. Synchronizing your movement to an external metronome demands constant attention to a precisely timed task, forcing the brain to bypass its default motor pathways. Pure mechanical load dictates tissue strength. Deliberately timed execution is the variable that commands neurological change. A 2024 systematic review by Gordon and colleagues analyzed 12 randomized controlled trials to measure this effect. These trials compared groups performing the exact same exercises at the same intensity. The only difference was that one group lifted at their own pace, while the other followed a metronome. This chart tracks corticospinal excitability. The self-paced group showed zero change. In the metronome group, it increased by 60%. We see the same in cortical inhibition. The self-paced group remained at baseline, while the metronome group reduced inhibition by 40%. This data indicates that the metronome reestablishes the electrical pathways between the brain and the muscle. This translates to physical performance. Despite matching the total work, the metronome group achieved a 25% increase in maximum strength. The self-paced group gained only 19% because they left the neurological component of strength unaddressed. At an identical workload, paced lifting builds more nervous system capacity than load alone. It is common to wonder, why can't I just count the tempo in my head? Clinical data shows that internal counting fails to produce the cortical changes observed in the Gordon review. Internal counting is easily subsumed by the motor autopilot as soon as physical effort increases, allowing the brain to return to its default state. The driver of this adaptation is a rigid external cue, an audible click or a visual app that forces external synchronization. Matching a pace established outside your body demands the conscious attention necessary to drive motor cortex reorganization. Conscious attention to an external stimulus is the non-negotiable prerequisite for this neuroplastic effect. We can translate this physiology into the specific protocol used in the clinical trials. The prescription is 4 sets of 6 to 8 repetitions at 70 to 80% of your 1-rep max. Each repetition follows a precise 7-second cycle. The concentric, or upward phase, takes exactly 3 seconds to drive the weight up. The eccentric, or downward phase, takes exactly 4 seconds to lower the weight. This results in approximately 50 seconds of total time under tension for every set. These sessions are performed 3 times per week, with at least 24 hours of recovery between bouts. This 50-second window is the threshold required to recruit fast motor units while maintaining the timing discipline needed for neural adaptation. The descent is deliberately 1 second longer than the ascent to account for the way tendons handle force. This asymmetrical tempo is designed to manage tendon strain magnitude. The physical strain on the tendon reaches its peak during the eccentric lengthening phase. A strict 4-second duration controls the strain accumulation and prevents the dangerous force spikes that occur during rapid, uncontrolled descents. Executing this slow descent at 80% load is cognitively taxing, much harder than lifting at your own pace. This cognitive load signals that the motor cortex is being forced to adapt to a high-precision task while the tendon absorbs controlled strain. Training at high intensity means that at some point, your timing will begin to break down. When this happens, follow the absolute rule of regression. You must drop the weight, not the tempo. Sacrificing the 4-second descent to keep a heavier load on the bar eliminates the stimulus your nervous system requires. Tempo is the independent variable that forces the adaptation. Load is simply the dependent variable you adjust around it. Prioritizing load over timing turns a targeted rehabilitation exercise into a general strength movement that fails to address the underlying inhibition. This tempo principle bridges Phase 1 isometric holds to the heavier loading of Phase 2. The established heavy-slow resistance protocol is simply this very same tempo discipline applied to progressively heavier loads. This slow rifting will not cost you your fast-twitch fibers. The heavy load ensures those motor units are recruited. Download a metronome app, set it to a 7-second cycle, and abandon self-paced lifting for your targeted rehabilitation exercises. Your time investment remains the same, but your cognitive focus must shift. By utilizing external pacing, you move from waiting for a tendon to heal to actively retraining your motor cortex for maximum power.